Hi and welcome to another gaming video. And today's question for this video is, would you class the Nintendo DS as a retro console? It may only be around 15 years old. I think came out around 2004, and retro consoles, using the term retro, usually are a lot older than that. But the DS was never top of the range when it came out. Nintendo always sort of used lower end hardware in comparison to what their competition is using, and never, I'm not going to say they don't compete, but they're not out there to go up against the big consoles. They have their own way of doing things. Their game library is one thing that sells them, so they don't need to push out hardware that's in comparison to what Sony or Microsoft would put out. So if you look at the software lineup for the DS, it's very platform based. Never really sort of went into the 3D world. The hardware really wasn't up to it. You had things like a 66 megahertz processor and 4 meg of video RAM. That's really not going to cut it into 3D. We did have a few games like Super Mario 64 DS, one of the rare 3D games. You had Metroid Prime Hunters, but the majority of the games were 2D sort of platformers or racing games. Really didn't work on the DS. You had a couple of Burnout titles and they really weren't great. It was down to hardware limitations, and if you're releasing a console that is sort of behind even before it starts, it's going to hit retro before it should do. I kind of class the DS as a retro console. I mean, I've been a huge fan of it ever since its release, and it's just something that kind of dawned on me. And I think one thing that stops it being pushed into retro is the fact that you can play all DS games on a 3DS, 2DS, and the last 2DS, the new 2DS XL, was released in 2017, so it only makes it sort of 4 or 5 years old. But because the 2DS and 3DS can play all of the DS library, it kind of stops it from slipping into that retro name. I think it's just older rather than retro, and there is nothing wrong with playing DS games. My new 2DS XL is my favourite console, and I didn't really think of DS as being retro until recently. So what do you think? Do you think that you would class a Nintendo DS as a retro console, or does the fact that the 3DS can play all of the games kind of keep it out of there for a little bit longer? Or do you now class the 3DS as a retro console? I wouldn't go that far yet. I think it's got a lot longer before it hits that retro feel. But that was just my thought. So would you class the Nintendo DS as a retro console? This is 2021, released in 2004, and let me know what you think. Link, like, subscribe, enjoy.